Good morning, everyone. I'm Kevin Allen, and I'm joined by my usual podcast partner, former NHL defenseman Tom Laidlaw, who played for the Rangers and Kings. And, of course, we are the Laidlaw and Allen Report.
I got to interrupt you one second. I'm always thinking you introduce me all the time, and sometimes you say some nice things about me even. And we never talk about your background, too. So we need to remember that Kevin is in the Hockey Hall of Fame. You won what award did you win?
Elmer Ferguson Award and the Lester Patrick Award.
Right. So you're in the Hall of Fame. He was the head of the Professional Hockey Writers Association for how many years?
Like a decade, 10 or 11 years, I think. Yeah.
So I just think it's important. I don't think people maybe always recognize how much you've done in your career or something. So we need to do that. As soon as I start saying nice things about Kevin, he's frozen. We should also take note, too, that I always joke around with Kevin that he's in like about 75 Hall of Fames, and he is in several Hall of Fames. So as soon as I start saying nice things about you, you frozen.
Yeah, I zip off. That's bad news. So, yeah, I don't know why that's happened the last couple of shows. I thought we'd gotten over that. So, anyway, there's a lot to talk about.
I joke around. One sec. I joke around about how many Hall of Fames you're in, but how many Hall of Fames are you in?
I'm just the one. I think what ended up happening when you started that joke is I had been honored by. I ended up going to two different high schools, and both of them had named me Alumnus of the Year within a year of each other. So you started joking that I was in all these Hall of Fames. So they don't really have Hall of Fames, but I was Alumnus of the Year for two different high schools. I actually joke with my kids that I've got to be the only person in America that is an Alumnus of the Year at two different high schools. That's probably not true, but
yeah, that is fine. Yeah, most people go. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, but it's just happenstance. I spent 1 year at a Catholic school, and then we had a big vote in I guess it was 1970. And so parochial schools couldn't get public aid, and so all the Catholic schools closed, and I went to public school. So I was Alumnus of the Year for the Wayne St. Mary's and also Wayne Memorial High School. So that's how that ended up happening. And then right after that, you started joking around that I was in all these different Hall of Fame. So anyway, there is a lot to unpack today, Tom, because now that we have an agreement in place to play. There's protocols. I know you've been reading up on those. We're going to get to those in a minute. We also had a free agent signing, and I think this is going to be the first of many. Michael Granlund signed with Nashville, and I want to talk about that first because to me that's a little surprising, and it's surprising from this perspective. I didn't think it worked out all that well for both Granlund and the Predators when he came over and played on that team. Like it just didn't seem like a great fit. And I thought the objective was to get a little harder to play against. I thought the objective was to have some pushback. And Granlund is, is a gifted offensive player, but he doesn't really change that second line in terms of making it, more difficult to play against. And does it really alter the top six like they had hoped to do? And I mean, now. Well, we still got Arvidsson, Johansson, and Forsberg, and now we've got Duchesne and Granlund and Luke Kunin. Yeah. I'm not sure that's a major improvement.
It kind of, I don't know the details, but it almost tells me, like, if David Poile agrees with us that they need to get harder to play against, and all the things we've heard is that's the case, maybe he couldn't get anybody else. I mean, what else is out there to take, right? I mean,
no,
Wayne Simmons kind of fits that bill. Maybe not as a top six guy, but Toronto got him. But yeah.
But saying that, I mean, I hadn't really heard anything of any players that were difficult. I mean, we've heard Poile being in discussions with Tampa about perhaps Tyler Johnson, and obviously he's a smaller player. And we talked about Hoffman, who's essentially a goal scorer. So now basically what we've changed up now is, Craig Smith is gone and Luke Kunin is in.
Yeah.
And that I don't know that really changes your
no, it doesn't.
Your offense.
Yeah, it doesn't change your offense. It doesn't change the character of the team. Unless David Poyle is saying, listen, he really believes in these guys. Because listen, when I talk about them not having that culture, it again, very talented players, right? Johansson and Duchesne, particularly for me, are two very talented players. And if they're playing at the top of their game, well, that makes that team better. But they have not been playing at the top of their game. And again, I think it's the mix there. They don't seem to have that accountability. I talk about Boston so much. Now Tampa's got it. The Rangers are developing their culture. So it's like when you go to play for those teams, you play a certain way. You play a very unselfish game. I see in Nashville a very selfish game. The guys if they get hit, they feel like they have to retaliate right away and take bad penalties. That to me, the talent is there on that team, but the attitude of the team is really what's got to change. So, but again, Granlund doesn't change any of that. So maybe David Poyle just says, listen, I believe in this group of guys. They didn't play well last year, but I believe that they really can play well. I got you. Lost you there again for a little bit.
Yeah, boy, I'm just not liking this morning. I'm not sure.
Yeah, you know what happens? I gave you a compliment there, and that's what happened. So
yeah, it really kind of put us over the edge in terms of. But here's another point I want to make and get your opinion on this. Okay, so Nashville is in the very difficult Central Division. Yep. Where they're slugging it out with Colorado and St. Louis and Minnesota and all that. Now all of a sudden, for a 1-year period, we moved over to the division with Tampa Bay, Carolina. Those are all offensive teams, but they're not teams that we think of as being all that difficult to play against. I mean, Tampa is obviously, but do you think that's influenced what David Poyle was going to do? Now he still has $10 million left, so he could do something else too.
Well, there's all those teams that are right up against the cap, right? I mean, past the cap in Tampa's case. Although Tampa thinks, right, that they could get compliant with putting Kucherov on long-term injury. Is that the case there? I think that's what they're talking about.
I don't know. Yeah.
There's other teams that have done this in the past. I think New Jersey did this with, I can't remember, a few years ago, a good player they got from, I think it was from Washington. I can't remember the name, but sometimes you wait and say, okay, I've got this cap space. Let's wait until another team gets into trouble. Nobody's panicking right now because you're not, you don't have to be compliant with your cap yet. And nobody's panicking yet because you're not losing hockey games yet. But once we get to that point where those things are happening, now teams say, I've got to make a move. So who can I make a move with? And generally it's tough to make moves with teams that are up against the cap. So now that here sits Nashville, who's got a pretty good lineup, they still have the cap space. Now you can sit there and kind of pick off somebody that is kind of in a panic mode to make a move. Maybe that's what David Poyle's thinking. I've got a good enough team for right now, but I can make my team better when somebody gets in trouble.
Well, and you don't have to make your move like right now. That cap space will be pretty valuable as you move forward. And a lot of people have suggested that there'll be some players that'll be made available that. In a 56 game season, like if you start out slowly and then have a lengthy losing streak, you're almost out of it. So you could make some moves relatively early.
Yeah, and to your point, does he think he's got a good enough lineup now? Which I think he does. The lineup there is good enough to go forward and at least tread water and maybe do better if everybody plays to the top of their game. And you're right. Now you pick off somebody else that's in trouble. David Poyle could end up looking like smartest GM in the league. Remember way back when Colorado, it's awful. Joe Sakic. Everybody was saying when he was supposed to be moving Duchesne that, he's screwing this thing up. You got to move. You got to get whatever you can for him now. And he waited, and he got a boatload for him. So I think if you're patient, especially it depends on the situation, right? In Colorado's case back then, they weren't ready to be a contender at that point yet. Nathan McKinnon hadn't developed the way he has now. All those other young players, the great players they have there now weren't there. And it's the same thing, different situation with Poyle in Nashville. They are like I said, a good enough team. So you're really not in a panic mode to do anything, but yes, you'd like to improve.
Well, yeah. And you, without even having signed Granlund, the way that division is, that division, despite having a Stanley Cup champion in it, really feels like the weakest division. You picked Nashville to make the playoffs even before they made the Granlund.
Yeah.
So, in that division, maybe they can get away with it. Maybe that influenced them. And it'll be interesting to see whether he makes any moves, going forward. Well, let's go on. You were just going over all the protocols, and I wanted you to talk about it as a former player, but there's going to be some changes in terms of how many players can be in the weight room and so forth. What can you tell us about the protocols?
So, the first one, things such as they're only allowing 10 players at a time into the weight room to work out. So it seems like, and then the travel, I think they're allowed to have 50 people travel with the team. So it seems like a lot of the same protocols that were in place with the bubble that they had last year, although there is no bubble this time. One of the things that's still being discussed is what's going on in Canada, right? They've got no reassurances from the people in Canada, from the politicians up there, that they'll be able to play there and move around. So that kind of puts the fact that it's gone on now, what is it, the 23rd today? And they start training camp on the 1st. Or is it the 3rd? The third they start training camp, I believe. Man, that's a time's tight. Even guys having to quarantine, right? They've got to get into Canada. I'm assuming the guys are all there now because they're supposed to be quarantined for 14 days before they can get out and get moving around. So, and places like Montreal, apparently the cases are skyrocketing there too. So time's awful tight. I know they've come up with this date to start on the 13th, but man, I wonder, how
that date is so important for this reason. The way it works out now, they're going to try to play 56 games in 116 days. So that's one game every 2.07 days.
Yeah.
And I read, it might have been Larry Brooks, the New York Post, that said, that isn't all that different from what we normally do, which is 2.27. But really, it is only from this perspective. While it's still almost a game every other day, if you think about it in this way, so if we play on that schedule and you play 10 games, that takes you 20.7 days to play 10 games. And if you do it under what we normally play, I think it's 2.27. So, 20 times 2.27. Now you're 5 days.
Right.
So, that's 3 or 4 days.
Right.
That, every time you play 10 games and over or maybe it's 2 point something, but either way, you're going to lose probably 10 days. Right. And those are probably going to be what would normally be off days.
Right. But here's the thing, though, that they haven't really announced yet, but there's speculation that they may be like baseball and you go into a city and stay there for 3 days and play a couple of games, right? So the travel, if that's the case, the travel is eliminated. And I tell you, the division that really benefits from that is the East Division. You think of the Islanders, Rangers, Philly, Boston, Washington, man, their travel is going to be next to nothing. You compare that to the teams in the West that, like Minnesota, that's got to be traveling all over the place. So if that is the case, if they do play those games, I think that East Division benefits anyways from the schedule and the way they've realigned the division, but even more so if they have those 2 or 3 games in one location all the time.
Yeah, I've always certainly there's wear and tear with travel, and it's going to be reduced, so it's going to be less aggravation. Right. But the way athletes travel now, anyway, I've never really bought in too much to the idea, if you're going out to the West Coast, that, there is some issues there because, you're getting back, usually it's 4 a.m, so you're not going to get your proper rest on that day. I see that, but, I don't think it's a major issue, but I think it's a little bit of an issue for days off. I think players have started to look forward to having those days off, and it's going to be difficult to find those days, now, or at least more challenging than it was in the past.
Yeah. So, my old school feeling, like, suck it up, come on.
Yeah. Well, no, but just I don't care what profession you're in, you like to have your days off. If you said to me, when I was a journalist, okay, over a 4-month period, you were going to get 10 days off, and then those were gone the following year, you'd miss them,
Yeah.
So
I know. I see, but I didn't like days off. Like I wanted, like I felt like when I had a day off coming back it was tougher. It's like I lost something. You had to get going again.
yeah.
I think a lot of guys are still like this too, and a lot of guys I played with.
Well, you weren't into cooking back then. Now you have hobbies.
That's true.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
you didn't really have hobbies before. I will say this though, and this is really important. I think, like if you're a fan now of a team, you're going to be able to count on your team pretty much playing every other day. Like this is going to be so fun if you're a fan.
Oh yeah. Oh
yeah. I mean, every other day you're going to watch your Rangers.
Yeah.
And
it's fun for the players too. Like I know the fatigue factor, but man, it's fun playing games like that, playing all the time. Oh, yeah. No, I agree, but it would be great for the fans. I mean, hockey. I mean, I remember the hockey came back last time, right? When it was like 3 or 4 games a day. That was great. So, like, yeah.
Well, yeah, but okay, just look at it now. So, like Toronto and Montreal, like Montreal is going to go into Toronto for 3 games.
Yeah,
like that third game.
Oh,
there's going to be hatred.
Man, Gallagher, man, you can play against one game against Gallagher from Montreal. You hate him. Imagine playing 3 games against him. That'd be fantastic. And now Toronto's that's a good call by you because now Toronto's toughened up their lineup, right? They've got some grittier guys in their lineup now, so those could be some good battles.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. The whole divisional, aspect of it, and this is really, for younger people. I mean, really, you got to be my age to appreciate the original 6.
Yeah.
So that, most people don't understand that, but this is how it was.
Yeah.
You played 12 games against, the other team. In your division, or 14 once they went.
Even way back when I played, and we would play preseason games. Like we didn't have 2 preseason games against Philly. We'd have 2 preseason games against the Islanders, and they were just brawls the whole time. Then you had to play. What did we play? Like 6 times against each other, or whatever. And then usually you're playing in the playoffs against those same teams again. So a lot of times you're playing like 15 games against those guys. So yeah, there's some real hatred built up. There was.
Yeah. So that's really going to be great. What's your feeling on what's happening in Canada with the idea we haven't even worked it out yet, whether or not, these teams are going to be allowed by their provinces to play?
Well, again, we touched on it last time, right? From the politicians' end, you would think, okay, hockey in Canada is everything, so the politicians are going to do everything they can to make it work. On the flip side of that, you don't want to, if I'm a politician in Canada, you don't want to make it look like the NHL and the NHL players are getting preferential treatment. Everybody, this is a pandemic. People are dying from it, getting sick from it, losing their jobs from it. And now we're saying, well, that's too bad. But now we're going to let the NHL hockey players do what they want to do. So I don't know. Do they have to go into a bubble? I mean, they worked it out obviously with the bubble with Edmonton and Toronto. Do the politicians come back and say, well, listen, the only way it's going to work again is if we do another bubble situation? And that's a tough thing to do. And then what do you do if you do the bubble? Then obviously you can go into the playoffs, you go right to the semifinals. But at that point, now you've got to get out of the bubble. So there's a lot of things to work. To me, it's a timing issue, right? I mean, like you said that, like those dates, you're compacted schedule already. And if you don't get started when they say they're going to get started, it's going to be even tougher to get the season. And maybe they have to cut more games. But to me, it's a timing issue. I mean, at some point, they've got to say, listen, it's just not going to work in Canada. Now we've got to move back down to the U.S., bring the Canadian teams down to the U.S. someplace and play there.
Yeah. Well, if there's no fans, what does it matter?
I guess it's the moving around, right?
And there are some television issues. You need to get into an arena where they're all set up for television. You don't want a bad quality telecast of hockey. So you want to go to NHL style arenas where the camera positions are established, and you don't have to go and you don't have to rebuild everything. It's all set and ready to go. I'm going to put on my hypocrite hat again. Because I am definitely a hypocrite when it comes to the World Juniors, because I'm wondering whether or not they should be playing, but I'm looking forward and I'm going to be glued to my TV when they are playing. But, as I was reading about the new strain of COVID that's now prevalent in the UK, my thought process is, is it prevalent in Europe as well? And are these young players coming over bringing this new strain, this evolved strain? And although the scientists say that they can adjust the vaccine but it will take them a few weeks. Well, that's just more people dying. So I wonder about all that. Where are we at now? What's your thoughts on the World Juniors? Are you glad we're there? Do you think they should play?
I think if they get into a bubble and they're all tested, they get into the bubble and they're all positive. Excuse me, they're not positive; they're negative. I think we're fine. But you're right. It's like we're bringing in. The fact is, you're bringing in young people from all different countries, and what's the status of the pandemic in those countries, right? And if they bring it in and infect everybody else. I don't. To me, listen. I think way back to March, and I was skeptical how the NHL was going to come back and play at all. They did that, and they did it very well. The players are great. The NHL did a fantastic job. I'm still skeptical when I see these things, especially now that the pandemic is taking off again, or the virus is taking off again. But they somehow find a way to get it done. You look at the National Football League with all the positive tests that have come out, but they continue to play. It doesn't seem like it's not reported anyways that it's infected other people. It just is limited to the teams, and they've been fine afterwards. So we've been going at it so long now. That's the thing. It's just like, oh man, when's it going to end? But people are finding it.
Well, I mean, the NFL showed the NHL that we can work it without being in a bubble, and I think I've said before, I think it'll be a little bit more complicated because multiple games will be impacted if a player goes on the COVID list. Is there anything on protocol about how you get off the COVID list? Is it 3 negative? There, I'm doing it now. 3 negative tests in a row.
Positive test protocol. Immediate isolation pending testing. Positive testing. So let's get the different categories here. Positive test protocol for group 1 and 2A individuals. So it's just really, I think it's to say they self-isolate, immediate isolation pending testing. So it's immediate isolation pending testing, positive test in a symptomatic individual. So they break it down. It's pretty lengthy here. We'd have to go through. I'd have to read it through more. But it seems like it's very thorough. They've got everything covered. So
well, I mean, it'll be interesting to see what is required to get you back competing. Is it going to be 3 negative tests, or will it just be a certain amount of days after you've been diagnosed positive, or what will it be to get that? I mean, like how big will the sphere be of players that are immediately have to be isolated?
Right. So they get an interesting chart here. Initial positive test. So isolate player, begin contact tracing. So then they do a confirmatory test. Then they do a second test 24 hours later. Then they do a third test 24 hours after that. If after those tests, after all those tests, they have to be, if they're confirmed positive, they isolate the player and they do contact tracing. So again, obviously after the third one, I guess I'd have to find out how long you stay there. But only after the third one, or if you're confirmed negative, you can exit isolation, resume training, and release contacts.
Let me ask you this, because I don't even know the answer to this. And I know you run the power play in Los Angeles. Like, how long are those power play meetings when you have them?
Well, we had some pretty lengthy meetings. I mean, you go back to Herb Brooks' day. There's some long meetings, right?
I bring that up because, the Denver Broncos lost all their quarterbacks because they were all in one. They were watching film together.
And they didn't wear masks, right?
And they didn't wear masks. So suppose you have a power play meeting and then somebody in that power play group tests positive. Does that mean the entire power play unit is going to go in isolation? So,
they get the contact tracing. So if they're, I guess they at that point, once they find out who was close to the positive test person, then they've got to test them right away. And if they test positive, then they've got to go through that same series of tests, right? Ultimately 3 tests within 48 hours there, it looks like. So,
I mean, people are going to have to be a little creative in terms of how they hold their meetings. And
and the thing too, it's that complacency. Like I even find myself sometimes I've gotten complacent. Like for me, I've isolated myself. Then I realize, okay, I get around people. Now I got to get the mask on, and I've got to be careful. Getting too close to people. To me, that's the thing. And they're young people too, which adds to it. is there going to be somebody there that's constantly saying to them, even at the NFL, when they first got started, you see the coaches got in trouble because they didn't always have their mask on. Well, now they've reprimanded them and fined them and everything. So now they're keeping the mask on all the time. I'm assuming the same kind of thing is going to happen. It's natural to happen. You get complacent. You feel, okay, I'm tested negative. Nobody's sick around me. So I don't have to wear the mask today. Well, you do have to wear the mask. So.
Yeah. Yeah. It's it's just so complicated to be an athlete these days. To be sure, but you're being paid well. You got to figure out how it can be done. And
hey, did you see where England there in Vegas retired?
Yeah, Derek England. Yeah, and he was. What's interesting about him is that he was, when they drafted and brought him to the team. He was the only guy who was from Vegas. Like he had grown up there, but he had moved there. Right. And his family was living there at a time when he was drafted, so he was kind of like the net.
Right. I wonder why he's retiring now. You wonder. I have to read up a little bit more. You wonder if it's got something to do with the virus.
Because of that.
Sorry, Kev. I lost you for a second. But did you see? Was there a reason he gave for retiring, or is it just time to retire?
I guess it was time to retire, but he's not that old. Look him up, his age up. But I don't think he was. It didn't. He was a pretty prominent player when he started, and then I think over time he started to lose his playing time.
Because before he got to Vegas, I mean, he was always a good player, but I mean, that leadership role in Vegas, and he played such a big role when they had that terrible shooting there, and they came back, and he was the one that got up in front of all the fans and made the that heartfelt speech was fantastic too. Speaking of defensemen too, our buddy Matt Cater, who represents Big Zdeno Chara, was quoted as saying that there was 20 teams that had reached out to him regarding Chara, but he was only concentrating on the Boston Bruins at this point. So I'm assuming that's true. But Matt's a good agent too, right? I mean, he says there's 20 teams that reached out to him. Was there really 20 teams that were inquiring about Chara, or was this Matt just having conversations with everybody? Those,
all of them saying, "Hey, what's going on in Boston?"
Right? Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
But I think I can't see anything different happening, right? He's going to sign with Boston, right?
Well, you would think so. But what took so long? That's what I don't understand.
You kind of wonder. I mean, did they have something else going on? They just said to him, "Listen, we can't sign a contract right now. Let's hold off on it." Because I'm the Bruins. You're not going to play games with Zdeno Chara, right? I mean, there's no point in that. I mean,
well, we have just lost track of Derek England. How old do you think he is?
I'm going to say 33.
Yeah, he's 38 years old. He'll be 39 this season.
Wow. Oh, wow. Okay.
So we did lose track of him. Yeah.
Yes, we did. I liked him to play too. He was good.
Yeah. Well, that happens. Sometimes people say, how old's the guy? And you have to think about it. And you either think about what his draft year was, or, you try to give it some context. But I would have guessed, I don't know if I would have said 33. I think I would have said 34 or 35, but I wouldn't have said 38.
Yeah. So that means Vegas has lost Schmidt and England off their defense. They've added Pietrangelo.
Yeah.
So, I guess you're not as deep, but I'm sure they got young kids coming up too. So,
I mean, I don't know. The thing about it is like you would trade Pietrangelo certainly for Schmidt. But I think what I'm bothered by is I think the idea of getting like someone like Pietrangelo is you add to what you already had, and they had to subtract in order to make that addition. So, the gain isn't as great.
Right. Have you seen anything on Marc-Andre Fleury at all? Any rumors?
Nothing whatsoever. So, I think we're going to see a lot happen here, obviously, before the season starts on the 13th. Like we essentially have now, 20 days to sort of get everything together. So.
Right. And man, you think about, I think it might have been Larry Brooks again who wrote an interesting article about Lafreniere as an example. All these young kids coming in, they're going to have 10 days of training camp and no games, no preseason games. They're going to jump right into the regular season. So typically for a young player, those preseason games are pretty important, right? To get your feet wet, to give the coaches a chance. Like, is this kid ready to play or not? Now they've got to make decisions on these kids to put them in the lineup or not. Again, on a shortened season where every game is even more important. So not only are you worrying about the development of the young player, but win or not, and you want to play these kids. So
I think Larry's right on that. The only thing I would say is the 18-year-old player coming out of juniors is a lot different today than it was even 5, 6, 7 years ago. He's had pro training for 2 or 3 years in the off seasons. He's had stick handling coaches and personal fitness trainers, and they're more prepared.
Right. Then one advantage they've had in the past too is that they have like exposure to the NHL players and the NHL lifestyle. So it isn't as much of an adjustment for them. We didn't have any exposure to it. The only problem now with these kids, they haven't had this group of players like Lafreniere, for example. He hasn't been around. I don't think he's been around the rest of the players. I don't know where they would. So they're not going to have that. But again, and you know what? The young players are treated differently too. And I mean that in a good way. Like the young players before were, hey, sit in the corner and keep quiet. We don't care who you are, how good you are. We'll get to you in a while, but now they're treated like if they're good enough to play, they're treated like a veteran player. And I saw Zdeno Chara's quote when it's just a change of times. He was asked about initiation and the treatment of rookie players, and he said, "Listen, if you're on the team, you're on the team. It doesn't matter if you're a rookie or not." So that attitude has certainly changed too. So. You still there, bud? We're losing you.
I just bet. Yeah, well, I think that is true as well. That I think veterans realize that a young player now, especially with the game is played, especially a fast player, he's going to be making an immediate contribution.
Yeah.
It's just better to accept them. And the days of hazing players hopefully are long gone. And
never did any good. There was no benefit to the player, no benefit to the team. That was so ridiculous, that stuff. Yeah. And I participated in it too. So.
Yeah. No, there was all kinds of rituals back then that have gone by the wayside. Yes. Well, anyway, this has been the show today. We appreciate you tuning in. I want to wish everyone a happy holidays, particularly my buddy Tom Laidlaw here, who has already celebrated Christmas last weekend with his family.
Right. And my other son and his wife are coming back from Florida on the 27th. We're going to celebrate Christmas again. So we're going to do another turkey dinner.
Double dipping. I love. Oh, you're going to do another turkey dinner.
Exact same dinner. We have tradition. We have to do the exact same thing. So, and I'm more than happy about that.
Well, that turkey looked outstanding. There's no doubt about that. The wonder of the air fryer, which we certainly understand in this house as well, although we deep fry our turkeys.
Yes. So that wasn't air fried, that turkey. That was done in the oven.
Oh, you did it in the oven. Okay. Well, either way, it looked great. So
yeah, we did. I sprayed a little bit of oil on my turkey this time to brown it. It browned up a little bit better. So learning new things.
I thought the last one you did look pretty good, but it's interesting you said that because my wife looked at that turkey and she said he must have a pretty damn big air fryer, because that looked like about a 14-pounder.
Yeah, it was actually a 22.5-pound turkey, that one.
Oh, it was bigger. Wow, that's massive.
I had to run some over to Ron Greshner, some leftovers. My buddy at the beach there, where I'd go marching every day, I had to bring him some leftovers. So
now, in the morning when you do your 3:30 a.m. march, do you ever have any of the grasshoppers join you, or is you all alone on that?
No. So I've had to adjust my schedule a bit. So the march, actually, the first march happens at I go around 3:55. So it's a short march. I do the video. Because then I've got to get to the gym and work out before 6 o'clock, get all my workout done before 6 o'clock. So I'm usually in the gym by about 4:25, work out till 6 o'clock, and then it's off. Now we do an additional march at the beach where we post some nice videos.
Right. And why do you want to get your workout done before the people show up?
Right. Yeah, because then it's a smaller gym now, and they got to wear masks all the time, and it's tough to work out with a mask. So I get in there. The owner is a buddy of mine. He gives me a key, so I'm in there by myself working out. And I did not. You might get a kick at this. So I'm by myself in the gym, and I'm fired up. I get the music going, so I'm dancing around and everything because I'm all by myself. Normally, I wouldn't act like that in the gym with other people, but I didn't realize after a few weeks, the owner actually has cameras in there too. So he's probably videoed me, and it has some pretty interesting videos of me dancing around at the gym. So.
You're going to look great on social media when that.
Yeah, I better be nice to him. He's going to start planting those all over the place. Yeah.
Well, anyway, again, one other thing I was going to say, I saw you and Ron were at the same Ranger event. I saw a photo on Facebook of with Ron with fans, and
that was a couple of months ago. We were at a golf tournament.
Oh, that was a couple months ago. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I saw it with Susan Brooks, who's one of our regular.
Well, that was an old post that she made. That was a lot. She reposted that. That was from an event I think we weren't wearing masks in that world. That was from an event a while ago.
Yeah, I don't remember whether you were wearing a mask. So
Yeah, I think it was Ron Grescher's birthday the other day, so I think she posted it kind of like that. She was,
okay, all right, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Anyway, again, happy holidays, everyone.
Happy holidays, everybody. See you next week.